Welcome to a technology meeting about about a person that can't work technology. I guess this is the dominant theme of the last 18 months, right? Is trying to figure out, where your mute button is. So speaking of technology, I'd like to introduce our I think this is our 8th event. I'm sorry, this is our 6th event of the year. And it is going to be focused on the adoption and enhancing the digital health technology adoption and investment in the COVID era. We are, just to introduce TAG Digital Health a little bit, we are one of 23 societies in TAG. We happen to be one of the more active societies. We work closely with healthcare technology provider and plan groups in Georgia to spotlight and bring awareness to the digital health concerns, both regionally, nationally, and globally. Digital health in Georgia happens to represent one of the 6 major economic clusters here in Georgia. The digital health sector happens to include over 44,000 employees, $12 billion in revenue, and over 210 companies. We were one of the first to respond to the world of COVID last spring, developing virtual events. We actually held our first our first hybrid event last July. And due to a number of different sort of complications of where we are today, obviously we are all virtual. Nobody really expected a Delta variant to pop up in such a short-term time frame, but we would all love to be, live and in person again today, but it's just, it's not in the cards. Did you want me to dive into the digital ecosystem report, Chris, or did you want to give a quick blurb on it?
Yeah, I'd like to just spend a minute on this. You are looking at a physical report that we issued in January of 2020, so about 19 months ago. And this is something we try to do about every 2 years. It lists, once you get inside the details, it lists all 205 companies at that time that are digital health and have an office here, not just headquartered, but just have an office. And you looking at those numbers, that's where you get the employment numbers, the economic impact, and all those other numbers, some of which Brian was just sharing. Of course, as soon as we published this, I got a call the very next week. Hey, we just moved our company here. I know you didn't know about us, but can we get in the next report? Yeah, but you don't want to wait 2 years again, right? So we decided we're not going to do paper again. We're going to go digital. We're a technology association. We're going to use technology. So Taliant, our lead sponsor tonight that you'll hear about in a second, they offered to actually build a database for us. So it's going to be a website database. It don't have to be a TAG member to access it. We want the world to access it. And so we have a 15-person team, board members and volunteers who are building this database. We've already identified about 250 digital health companies, and there's more. We know we're missing some. And so we hope to launch this by the first of the year, by January 1st. There's no rush on it, but we think we can get there by then after some QA and stuff. And you'll be able to, you move in town, you'll be able to fill out a quick one-pager, add your company to it. We'll QA it, make sure it's legit, and we'll add you to the database and add you to the numbers. And the benefits could be Metro Chambers trying to recruit other digital health companies, and they can show them this list. Maybe you're a Boston investor and you want to look at RCM companies in Georgia. And so you'll be able to pull this up and do a sort. Give me all the RCM companies over $10 million in revenue, or give me all the women's health companies, or give me all the medical device companies or whatever, and be able to get sorts and lists and that kind of stuff. You can do great research. Sweater can be able to use it to see what kind of companies and what kind of degrees are going to be required to support digital health. And she can go off and modify her master's in information program at Kennesaw State, for example. There's a lot of tools that we can use for business development, for economic development, for recruitment, for a lot of different tools. So just want to give you a heads up. This is actually the link you see down there is the link. If you want to do a quick screenshot, or I'll tell you what, once I quit talking, I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat room. But you can download this report, the 18-month-old report, and it's live on the website today. And then once we get close to launching this thing, we'll make sure you guys all get a link to it so you can actually go to the live website. So thanks, Brian. I appreciate that.
You bet. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our board members who helped plan this particular event. Obviously, we can't do that without our all volunteer committee that put this together across marketing and event planning. And, you know, obviously a tip of the hat to Mary Beth who organized, herded all the cats, so to speak. So certainly appreciate all the efforts that Mary Beth did. So thank you very much to all the event planning committee. And of course, we can't put any of this on without any of our sponsors. And so first we'd like to introduce Bill from Tellient, who is going to be our Spotlight event sponsor.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Good evening, everybody. I'm looking forward to the discussion today with our panelists, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak about our company. Like I said, my name is Bill Brady. I'm with Tellient Systems. We're a 2020 Inc. 5000 company, which is a proud sponsor of tonight's event. We're a product engineering and custom software development firm based in Alpharetta, celebrating our 11th year in business. And we work with small and large technology companies in healthcare, financial services, hospitality, and other verticals, and have expertise in a broad range of technologies, building mobile, web, cloud, and embedded software solutions. We have deep experience in healthcare, such as building telemedicine applications, EHR platforms, RCM solutions, health informatics dashboards, and analytic platforms. And we provide our clients with a range of services from product strategy to design and development and ongoing maintenance. If you're interested in learning more about us, feel free to reach out. My contact information is, of course, on the screen. I would be happy to have a conversation with you. And I'll hand it back over to you, Brian.
Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Mush, and also pleased to be here with you all today. Thank you for that. I lead the product team at Integra Connect. Integra is a leading provider of technologies and services focused on providing solutions for value-based specialty care and precision oncology. We have a broad suite of cloud-based healthcare technologies and services, helping specialty care organizations optimize both their clinical and financial performance, particularly as reimbursement continues to shift away from fee-for-service to alternative payment models. We have an Integra Cloud platform. Everyone needs a platform that really support a broad set of applications. We participate in areas of population health management, advanced analytics, registry and regulatory reporting, specialty-specific EHR, precision medicine, as well as revenue cycle management. We typically target and partner with community practices, as well as health systems and hospitals, primarily focused in the United States, in oncology and urology specialties specifically. We also offer a suite of products and services to bioscience and industry partners as well, serving that side of the market. And we're also, proud sponsors of the event and pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. You guys able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you sound great.
Great. And Rodney from DSS. Do we have Rodney on? I don't know that I saw him on the.
Rodney's not with us. No.
I don't see him, unfortunately. So one of our other societies.
On behalf of DSS.
Okay.
Hi. I am Corinne Perry. I can speak on behalf of DSS just to give you a short info about what we are. Juno EHR is an electronic health record system where we basically are just looking to the past experiences to address known problems and pain points and different things of that nature that will help us create an amazing EHR. We have an open platform approach. And we know that there are a lot of EHRs out there, and we're definitely looking to compete with them as we launch, but definitely have a really great platform. And if anyone has any questions, I just realized I don't have my video on, sorry. If anyone has any questions, just let myself or Rodney know, and we can definitely answer any of those questions for you. If anyone was at HIMSS, we hope that you did come by our booth.
Thanks so much, Karen. And Sweta?
Thanks, Brian. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, perfect. My name is Shweta Sneha. I am the founder and executive director of healthcare management and informatics at Kennesaw State University. I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world because I get to work with some of the best and the brightest minds who are students in the program. But I also get to work with a thriving healthcare industry in the greater Atlanta area, and our focus has always been to ensure that we plug the workforce gap and to produce a robust workforce that has the skills that can help transform digital healthcare in more ways than one. So I'm always looking to partner with the industry and to support your growth, and in turn help us build the skills that we need to ensure the growth of digital healthcare and the healthcare industry in general. So with that, over to you, Brian. My information is here, and I think that's my cell number. Yes. So feel free to call or text. If you text me in the middle of the night, I will still respond. I know that's kind of scary, but yeah, I don't have anything else to do other than make sure that our program is growing. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shweta. I think it's worth mentioning that the event sponsor, Teliant, is obviously the sponsor for tonight's event. Those society sponsors are sponsors that do sponsor TAG Digital Health events throughout the entire year. And so we certainly appreciate those society sponsors helping us put on these events throughout the entire calendar year. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Caitlin and today's panel.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brian. And welcome everyone to the panel this evening. We have an exciting discussion planned for you on the topic of new and emerging technologies. I think everyone who's joined us recognizes that we've seen just incredible growth in digital health adoption and innovation the past year and a half. And I think many of us expect or hope that to continue. So looking forward to learning from our panelists. Before we dive in, I did just want to do introductions. We're not going to do them individually for those of you joining us, but Jessica's going to post in the chat. Would love for you to identify sort of which of the perspectives, innovator, investor, provider, there's a number of options, or please feel free to create your own. We just want to get a pulse check from the room, who's here, and it'll help us sort of shape the questions. While we're doing that, I'm going to ask the panelists one-on-one to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their background, but also how they're using digital health technologies today. Sort of what big meaty problem are you trying to address? And I'm happy to go first, and then Matt, I'll kick it to you. So hey everyone, I'm Caitlin Fross. I'm an associate partner with McKinsey here in our Atlanta office and part of our healthcare practice. I am very focused on virtual health. I believe quite strongly in bringing care into the hands of the consumer, thinking about how we make healthcare accessible, convenient, seamless, and sort of leverage what we've learned the past year and a half about the possibilities of telemedicine to actually put healthcare in your hands through digital health means. So really looking forward to the conversation tonight, but that's a bit of the perspective that I bring. Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. I am the co-founder of MapHabit. We are a care management tool for caregivers to help improve quality of life and independence, both for them and for the people that they love the most. The populations we specialize in are Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, and also intellectual and developmental disabilities. We patented a very unique pathway in the brain and the way that we use visual maps, which are basically pictures, video, audio that are sequenced together to help people really build habits and complete their activities of daily living with ease and dignity. So we'll tell you more soon, but thanks for having me.
Sandy, I want to ask you to go next, and then Ward.
Sure. Can I just check? Can you hear me, Caitlin, okay?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Perfect. Well, thank you. It's great to see everybody. My background is in medical devices and in pharma in terms of bringing solutions and products to market. And currently I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Impiricus. And what Empiricus is doing is it's solving the problem in the fact that $48 billion is spent by pharma ineffectively every year trying to reach and market to physicians. So what we do is we've created a marketplace that allows us to create elegant tools that support physicians in their clinical practice. And we've created the world's first digital AI concierge. So physicians in the US can basically use the concierge to ask for anything in terms of getting their patients onto therapy. And our goal is to get 1 million patients on therapy by 2025. The way that we make money is that we work with our pharma partners to occasionally connect and provide a message to them. And to come back to Caitlin's question, what's really exciting for me around digital is that it's a leveler. It really allows us to create a much more level playing field when it comes to equity, and also drive incredible efficiencies in being able to reduce healthcare costs. And I look forward to speaking on the panel in a few more minutes.
Ward, will you round us out?
Absolutely. So Ward Broom, I am both an investor and a mentor and advisor to startups in the Atlanta area. Work with a lot of healthcare startup companies, several in the digital health area. My background, I co-founded a company many years ago that was a healthcare company that helped improve efficiencies in operations within the hospital. And really enjoy being involved in the startup community. I'm a board member with Atlanta Technology Angels, so invest in these early stage startups as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And thank you everyone who responded in the chat. I think unsurprisingly, we saw a real concentration in healthcare technology, but some different flavors. I saw entrepreneur, I saw investor, I saw research, so we will do our best to hit them all. We're going to make time at the end for questions, but you do not have to wait. I think this group is a perfect size. Please chat your questions as we go throughout. Jessica will keep me honest. We'll weave them through as best we can. And at the end, we'll just open it up for a conversation. But I do want to start, Ward, I'm going to kick the first question to you. And I'd love to start by thinking sort of at the macro scale about the pace of innovation. And we've talked quite a bit about the fact that this year in particular, the first half of this year, we've already seen upwards of $14 billion, closer to 15, in fact, $1 billion investment in digital health. And that actually surpasses everything that we saw in 2020. And the deals are getting bigger and we're seeing more of them. And I think we sort of expect this pace of innovation to continue. And so given your perspective and your vantage point, I'd love your thoughts on what is contributing to this acceleration and what are some of the most exciting trends you're seeing from your investor perspective?
Yeah, so, really, of course, COVID is one of the big drivers behind the acceleration in digital health. And, now you're seeing money is freeing up. Now that there's, there was initially a hesitancy, you saw a drop in investment in startups. Now you're seeing a significant increase. There's a lot of money out there to put into these areas. And, COVID which out of necessity drove a lot of these technologies. Telehealth has been around for a long time. Digital technologies have been around for a long time. But it really took a crisis like COVID to really begin to push things forward. So really, you've seen an acceleration. Probably, we wouldn't have seen this type of acceleration in 10 years, but we've seen it over a 1-year period. And then you're also seeing a lot of things with increasing healthcare costs. You're seeing reductions in manpower, so nursing and physicians, they're stretched. There's a shortage there. People are living longer, so there are significant increases in chronic care needs as well. People want to age at home, so home care, they want to be monitored by their families, and also, providing more efficiencies within long-term care if you choose to be in a long-term care facility. So all those things have, really driven the acceleration that we're seeing out there. And then as far as technology and some of the exciting things you're seeing in technologies, and there's a lot of examples of these just in the Atlanta area as well. But, for instance, medication adherence, that's a huge problem in healthcare and one of the big drivers of hospitalizations. So with the ability to monitor medication adherence and control medication delivery remotely is a huge, market right now. We're seeing a lot of innovation in that area. Of course, in vital sign monitoring with all the wearables that are out there, and also with devices that, do not have to be worn. They might be positioned within a room in a house or within a hospital room that can monitor your movements. locally, there's a company called Keenly Health that uses ultra wideband radar that monitors your respiratory rates, monitors movements, can detect falls, those types of things, which are huge advantages to healthcare providers. And by the way, on the adherence side, there's companies like Intent Solutions and Teledose that are providing that monitoring and delivery for medications. And then there's collaboration tools for physicians. So, the ability for physicians to communicate, to see the same data, to understand what each other are doing is a huge advantage and improves outcomes. OncoLens is an example here in the Atlanta area of that. Diagnostic tools or tools that can provide better information and quicker. RCE, a local company here that can measure levels of troponin in the blood and do that within a 10-minute period to tell whether or not you're having a heart attack. That will free up significant resources in the ERs, keep people from being hospitalized if they can determine they're not really having a heart attack, or provide care quicker if they actually are having a heart attack. And then, lastly, I would say maybe when you think about 5G technologies and the acceleration of that, faster data speeds, that's been huge in the acceleration as well of these technologies, and things like, remote surgeries, robotic surgeries become possible. So, people that are in rural areas will have access to better care long term. So those are just a few of the examples that you're seeing out there, and every day something new seems to be popping up.
Yeah. Ward, I love the vision that you paint, sort of the thrust of investment that we're seeing. Sandy, I'm curious, from your perspective and as an entrepreneur, something that we've talked about is sort of hand in hand with the vision that Ward just painted is the reality is financing, access to capital, everything has sort of changed. And I'd love your thoughts on sort of the changes that we've seen around financing and access to capital. And specifically, if we think about where we are today, here in Atlanta, here in Georgia, are there benefits to being an innovator, to being an entrepreneur in this environment?
Great question, Caitlin. And the simple answer is yes. But let me break it down from a macro point of view, first of all. So on a macro level, when we look at access, there are so many more options and so many more ways that you can tap into the capital. We've seen the rise of crowd financing. There's all sorts of platforms like InCrowd and Republic. And we also see a rise in corporate funds. So I see that we've got Dustin and Shank, my colleagues, my ex-colleagues from UCB on. UCB and many of the healthcare companies now have their own evergreen fund where they will actually deploy. So there are now so many more, from an access point of view, channels where the money can come from. And then from a financing point of view, we've all seen the rise in cryptocurrencies. And one of the kind of things driving that is that people are not particularly happy with Mr. Powell just pushing the button and printing more money every day. We've got negative bond yields. Now, what all of this means is that people are trying to put their money into other areas, and then the investment into startups and into mid-sized growth companies is pretty prevalent. Also, that's key because of the different channels. That means that there's basically more competition. So there's actually, the deal values are going up significantly now with the corporate funds and the crowd financing as well. Key to this as well is that the benchmarks are changing. It used to be the case that there would be a standard deal term and deal size for a seed round versus Series A and Series B, and everything is shifting back one. So what used to be the deal terms for Series B is now Series A and vice versa. And when it comes to Georgia, Georgia is a really incredible place to do business. I think its size is very interesting. Georgia is big enough that it has significant impact, but it's small enough that you can actually master the healthcare ecosystem and have a pretty good understanding from a networking point of view of who all the key players are. And then from a financing point in Georgia, what we see is that there's actually a lot of high net worth individuals and local venture capital firms who have a mandate to invest locally, which is excellent. And then from a talent point of view, there's some very interesting things happening right now. So in San Francisco, there are a lot of societal problems that they have there, which means that not all of our tech graduates and entrepreneurs want to automatically relocate to Silicon Valley. So from a talent point of view, we actually have a lot of people who are still based here, and we've got access to excellent talent. But the challenge is that remote working means that we are now competing with every other company and every other job across the US.
Yeah, I think the theme of remote work and how it's changed the way that businesses operate has really pushed innovation, maybe not just in sort of the healthcare that we're delivering, but how we're thinking about our business models. And Matt, I'd love your comments on this. You've talked a little bit about how COVID has impacted your business model, both sort of needing to move away from brick and mortar, but also in how you think about recruiting, building your talent pipeline. So would love for you to talk us through sort of how have you adapted to the pandemic, especially Sandy mentioned the theme of remote work, sort of how has MapHabit been flexible the last 18 months?
Yeah, so it's, in short, it's been a blessing in disguise. Obviously, when you're in the thick of it, it hits you like a 1,000-ton truck. Yeah, we commercialized and then basically exited beta in the end of fourth quarter 2019, and we're very fortunate to have some good clinical research partners that then turned into commercial clients. And started the first quarter great, focus on assisted living communities, independent memory care, and then we were really depending on having boots how to really establish customer success within our operations and really just work on that product market fit, because that's the most important thing when you start in the first year. But certainly the accessibility on site became impossible. Our primary clients didn't have any time for innovation, let alone trialing out a kind of an emerging technology. So we really were forced to, pivot. We really focused on streamlining a lot of our processes, turning all of our training from in-person to virtual, really tightening up our CRM and really better defining what our customer segments are. We've been basically continuing research and commercializing, and we found a new market, the intellectual and developmental disability space. And started a decentralized clinical trial with people throughout the country, which, had this happened, we probably wouldn't have, learned about that market. So that was really eye-opening for us. And, there's been so many, nice programs available like PPPs and the EIDL loans. Also, the Atlanta Resurgence Grant was extremely, helpful for us to just kind of give us the liquidity that we needed to sustain our workforce. And now we really have a good presence in Georgia, but we have teams, throughout. We've embraced Asana project management software, had been doing everything kind of on OneNote and through Zoom calls, but Asana really has changed everything in terms of task handoffs and building templates that are all virtual. So from an internal organizational perspective, we've really matured a lot faster than we probably would have, but also from our customers and having, like as Ward said, within 1 year you advance 20 years on kind of the adoption of digital technologies. Now the primary market that we serve, which is older adults, getting them to be comfortable using a digital platform, because they are using it for FaceTimes or telemedicine, telehealth. It just made it so much easier for us to get that buy-in. So while it has been extremely difficult, there have been some silver linings that we're capitalizing on.
I want to pick up on a thread that you mentioned, Matt, which was sort of how are we getting older adults, in your case, comfortable with digital platforms? And I think we've seen sort of the consumer expectation of their healthcare experience has just dramatically shifted the last 18 months. We run recurring consumer surveys, and I think perhaps unsurprisingly, we're seeing increased comfort with digital health tools, although that varies depending upon your age and a number of societal factors. We're seeing increased desire for wellness services, looking for someone who's my partner sort of when I'm well and when I'm sick. And we're also actually seeing increased sort of interest in changing brands. So if it's not quite working for you, COVID sort of pushed people to try something new. And so I think given the focus on sort of digital, on wellness, and sort of exploring what's out there, Matt, I actually would like to go back to you and just sort of ask, have the expectations of your patients changed? And it may be your patients, maybe the caregivers, the family members that are sort of supporting them in their home. But can you talk through sort of, have you seen a shift at all in what they expect of their care experience?
Yeah, well, I think they're absolutely more open to speaking in front of a screen and not having that in-person context that you would really expect generationally. That was a big priority. One thing that has really been eye-opening for us is the basically coordination of not only a family caregiver and someone that's supporting their loved one, but also the inclusion of grandchildren and children as part of basically the team, the care team. I don't know that was as prevalent, but now that you've got younger people who just obviously embrace and latch on to technology, they're now able to help older adults in ways that they couldn't before. Whether it be through Zoom screen shares, or in our case uploading videos and having that accessible in an easy to consume fashion. We found that really the extended family is playing a larger role in people that traditionally once you get to a certain point, they become more and more isolated, and there's extreme costs related to that. I think upwards of $7 billion a year just for social isolation. So, it's been really helpful for us, and we are seeing a change in kind of the perspective for basically embracing technology with older adults.
I love, Ward, I'm going to ask you to actually build on that point. I was reflecting on something you said at the outset as you were thinking about sort of the investment trends that were most exciting to you. You mentioned two that were quite interesting to me. One was remote monitoring, so obviously bringing care closer to the patients, but also sort of being more present with them all the time with technology. And two was actually collaboration tools for physicians. So sort of in both instances, breaking down barriers to allow collaboration. I'd love your thoughts, sort of how have our expectations changed? And we can think of patients as consumers, we could think of physicians as consumers, but what do we expect from the digital health technology that we're using on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think that with these technologies, I mean, it's just like, it seems to be generational, but everybody kind of wants everything now. And, they want an answer now and as soon as possible. And they also want the right answer. So people are not willing to wait. And so, these types of technologies have really empowered the patients to be able to reach out to their physicians and to be able to get answers. Of course, that puts more pressure on the physicians, but at the same time, with these technologies, the physicians are able to deliver those answers quicker. So, everything seems to be accelerating, and and as far as the tools that we have, being able to provide better and more accurate diagnostics to have more targeted treatment for people has been huge. And so, for instance, with oncologists able to collaborate and to focus on someone's cancer, to be able to take that cancer and to figure out what is the right treatment, what's the right medication that can treat that problem. I mean, that's reducing healthcare. It's improving outcomes. And it's just, it's improving everything across the board. So the bottom line is, as technology progresses, I think expectations are progressing as well and accelerating.
And Ward, you mentioned sort of a more holistic approach. And Sandy, I'd love your thoughts on this. I think we've talked about the fact that consumer expectations are changing, but so are our expectations as a society more broadly. And I think we just hold ourselves to sort of an evolving, a different standard when it comes to questions of equity, questions of access. And so from your perspective, have the measures of success changed? And are we thinking about digital innovation differently in terms of what it means to be successful when we think about emerging tech?
Yeah, so great question, Caitlin, and I'm pretty much a metrics nerd, so happy to take that one. So yes, the metrics are changing. And what's happening is that we're moving away from volume to value and integration. So, if we look at the past, here's an interesting, fact for you. The peak of digital health apps in the App Store was in Q3 2017, and that was 47,000 digital apps. Now, we actually are, we're at about 45,000 now, but what's interesting is that, we ramped up very quickly from 0 to 47,000, and that was, now 5 years ago, and we've now, we're on a plateau, it's remaining constant of 45,000. And what's happened is that it used to be very much just focused on the number of downloads. And what we saw is that a lot of the digital health solutions were very much only focused on creating one app for one solution. So it really was very much just a numbers game. And what we see, or what I think will happen in the future, is that a much more of a move towards understanding the transversal value and the integration. So what we see from an investor's point of view, for the investors which are talking to Empiricus, is in addition to trying to look at the kind of dollar impact and the shareholder value, they are more focused now on what the patient and societal impact will be. And we see that as well with the hospital systems that we talk to. They used to be just very much focused on what the efficiency gains would be. But what they're looking for now is technology to help them build relationships with patients for the long term. And then if we look at the integration piece, digital really is helping us move away from those siloed solutions to actually providing transversal solutions for patients. And within the pharma world, you know, we've talked about it for a long time, but what we now see is that we actually are moving what we call past the pill. So it's not just about the syringes and the pills that are offered, but digital therapeutics, these types of companion therapeutics. Pharma companies now are very interested in this because they want to provide a much more holistic solution for their patients. And this is also the same for the healthcare systems, who are also taking a portfolio approach. So just to conclude, absolutely, the metrics are changing. They're moving much more towards value, and digital innovation is really helping equity and access, because what it does is it removes the physical barriers. You know, it's much more easier now to have a telehealth visit, and it's also making it much more affordable because, you know, a telehealth visit is more efficient, and that's also a big benefit from an equity point of view as well.
Thanks, Sandy. I'm, as a fellow metrics nerd, appreciate the structure around the goals that we think about as at a societal level as we think about measuring the impact of digital health. I noticed, Mary Beth, you chatted a question, and so I'm going to actually integrate it now. And the question was sort of almost the flip side of the conversation we've been having. It was, what are the biggest barriers to innovation? So is it cost? Is it adoption? Sort of what's standing in our way? And maybe even another way to frame that is sort of what worries you as we think about the possibility of digital health and innovation accelerating. Maybe what could prevent us from continuing down this path? What could slow us down? Ward, I'm going to ask you to start, and then Matt, I'll ask you to comment. But Ward, I'd love your thoughts sort of at a macro level as someone who sits across entrepreneurs, who's mentoring a number of individuals, sort of what's standing in their way, or what barriers should we be aware of?
Yeah, you know, from an innovation perspective, I think the biggest barriers are probably regulatory barriers, to be quite honest. If you get beyond just wellness devices and wellness apps, and you're talking about devices that can be used, you know, as a diagnostic device or to provide data to the physicians for treating a condition, ultimately the FDA is going to get involved. So, and they're trying to figure this out as well. So you have, you know, software as a medical device that that can really delay the process getting those approvals, and just understanding whether you fall under the umbrella of the FDA or not. So I think, you know, those regulatory barriers to me are probably the biggest concern, and the biggest can be the biggest damper to innovation that we're seeing.
Matt, I'd love your thoughts on this as well, whether regulatory or another barrier that you're facing from your perspective.
Yeah, no, at least for me, while we do have a software as a medical device that's under development, which will be regulated, for us, you know, it's been finding, you know, bandwidth for getting champions within organizations. You know, our technology is very straightforward. You know, a visual map basically breaks down a routine task. So making coffee, you know, you're going to get out the coffee grinds, you're going to put them in the coffee filter, get your coffee pot filled up with water, and basically help people who are visual and, you know, respond to sequence of images very well, and do that through repetition. They can build those habits and routines. So it is simple and really quite obvious, but to get, you know, a payer, for example, to take a leap of faith where they may have a very rich, revenue stream coming either from fee for service or some of these other models to kind of embrace a new technology. At least for us, that's been, one of the more challenging parts is to kind of prove our value and to, position our research to be more health economic related as opposed to, quality of life and independence. So, for us, it's been really the resistance to change in a system that has been working. For example, neurologists, this is a perfect match for them, but they have been, so used to doing what they're doing, they, have trouble kind of, buying into that kind of thing. So I think it's, while there's a lot of innovation going on, there's a lot of old mindsets that may be, hindering some of the adoption of things that really could, start to take off. Yeah, that's one thing I could share.
It's interesting across both of your comments. I think there's a theme around sort of making the space to disrupt or encouraging others to allow you the space to disrupt in terms of how you articulate your value proposition. We had a different barrier surface in our breakout, and Sandy and I were in the same breakout, but the question was asked sort of how are we dealing with the talent shortage today and thinking about hiring the workforce that we need to build the companies we're trying to build. Sandy, you had a really interesting take on how you're reinventing the way that you think about hiring and staffing and what it means to be an FTE. And I wonder if you'd share that with the broader group.
Certainly. And, I don't know if I have to apologize, but I'm kind of known for slightly radical dystopian views. So I'm not sure that we will have very traditional jobs in the future. In 20 years' time, it'll be very rare for young people to actually have a job in a long time for a company. So what I believe will happen and what we're practicing in Empiricus is that we'll be reliant on a handful of contractors spread throughout the world that are excellent at what they do, and they just work for multiple companies in a silo. So I think that's basically what's going to happen, is that we will be more reliant on people being able to work in the gig economy, and that's going to be, fine for them and their lifestyle. And the benefit for the companies is that you don't have to have the complexity of potentially having lots of employees, and you potentially have more productivity because people are just focused on one singular task. But yes, there are downsides, which are you ultimately have a challenge with culture. How do you knit that culture together for a company if nobody's ever met? But those are the types of the evolutions, Caitlin, that I think is going to be coming forwards.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, sort of before we open it up to questions and hear what's on the minds of the group, I actually would love to maybe step out of the societal level and actually hear more about your personal journeys. I saw there's a couple entrepreneurs, some investors on the call today, and I'm curious about sort of what inspired you to sort of take the leap. So Matt and Sandy, what sort of inspired you to take the leap to sort of disrupt, to try something new, especially given all of the barriers that we've just talked through? Matt, I'll ask you to start us off. I'm curious sort of, how did you think about becoming a co-founder, and what was it about the challenge that you're trying to solve that sort of inspired you to take that leap?
Yeah, so I graduated from Emory in 2001, spent most of my career in the Big Five doing management consulting, and then went off on my own for 11 years and basically did the same thing, but was an independent contractor. For me, it was just wanting to shock the system and do something different. I felt like even though I was a consultant thrown on these really challenging projects, I was still, a cog in the wheel doing someone else's bidding. And I didn't want that. I really wanted to have look back on my life and feel like I've made an impact in society. I've had zero healthcare experience until I started MapHabit. And for me, I've had numerous family members with neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disease and Down syndrome that I saw an opportunity, and I didn't want to just go back and try to find another project doing predictive analytics for financial planning and analysis. I wanted to solve problems where people, need practical tools to stay independent. And I did a lot of, research, and especially in the aging population, it's a population that's growing faster than almost any out there. I think, especially with dementia, it's doubling in the U.S. and worldwide every 20 years. And the concentration of wealth in that area is really high. So, I kind of put all that together, and because I have done some of the entrepreneurial pieces in the past, have a specific family, inclination or basically a genetic predisposition to these kind of conditions, I wanted to educate myself and try something brand new. And it wasn't really until I was walking on my street and ran into my co-founder walking his dog that we both had this, shared passion to build something together. So it was almost by chance, but I already had the bug, and I convinced myself that I didn't want to keep doing, and I really wanted, something new to try, and that's what got me going.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious also, I think sort of everyone takes the leap for a different reason. So Sandy, I'd love to hear your perspective as well, sort of what led you to solve the problem you're trying to tackle, sort of what was it about that felt like a burning platform?
Purely ADHD. I just can't sit still. I don't know. I mean, it was 70% ADHD, and 30% of it was seeing that there was a great opportunity to help. And, I think this actually, Caitlin, ties back into the digital component, which was, if I'd seen the same challenges 10 years ago, it would have been a bigger challenge to have rolled out solutions. So for me, what I saw was the amounts of money that the industry was spending trying to support physicians and to educate physicians and market to physicians. And I just see that I could come in and do something with Empiricus that was more effective. And as we move forward, we've been able to actually create this concierge tool that we have, which is focused on getting 1 million patients on therapy. And it's already working. We actually now see and have, feedback from patients that have said, I've never been able to access this drug before. I'm sitting in my car park in Walgreens in Alabama crying because I wanted to get this drug for the last 8 years, but could never afford it. So those are the types of messages and the types of things that we were always hoping to do in terms of creating that level playing field and using digital technology to actually get people help and support. So that's what drove me, was this ability to say, aha, I can see that we can actually support a very large group of people with some fairly simplistic solutions, quite frankly, but just by leveraging digital.
It's interesting. I think there's a clear theme across both stories about sort of a desire to personally impact change. Matt, whether it's something close to home for you, or Sandy, sort of seeing a problem that you feel like you could solve, and especially solve with digital. Ward, you have a really interesting perspective because you coach a number of entrepreneurs. And so I'm curious, as you think about sort of maybe some of the success stories in your portfolio, sort of what makes them successful? And I know there's no magic wand and there's no silver bullet, but are there any sort of words of wisdom or lessons learned that you would share with the entrepreneurs on the call as you think about sort of making the leap and deciding to sort of lead the charge on a problem that's dear to you?
Yeah, I wish I had the exact or the correct answer for that, but if I did, I'd be quite the wealthy individual. But you do see in speaking to entrepreneurs and in looking at stories like Matt's story and Sandy's story, you can begin to piece together a lot of the things that do make for a successful venture, and help these companies to get off the ground and to move on and to build and to grow. And a lot of it starts very early, and that's making sure you understand exactly who the customer is and what that customer needs. So, you're looking for that, identifying that problem and how big of a problem that is, and not only how passionate you are about that problem, but how passionate the customer is about that problem. And that takes time and a lot of research, and a lot of people don't have the patience for that kind of thing. And then also as you move beyond that, and let's say you do find that match and you do find a potential solution, you want to make sure that that solution not only is going to provide benefits, and this is especially true in healthcare when you're talking about physicians and nurses that are really busy, but not only solutions that provide benefits and provide better outcomes for patients, but also reduce the workload of those physicians and those nurses. If you're providing a tool that is a monitoring tool and someone has to sit in front of the screen all day looking at that, then they're not going to be attracted to your device. That's not going to be a tool that they're going to invest themselves in. They might try it, but they're not going to stick with it. And that kind of goes to the next point of finding early adopters in your journey. As you develop your product, finding those early adopters who are going to provide feedback and can serve as references as you move forward, because there's a lot of physicians out there who are interested in technology and may be willing, to bring that technology into their practices, but they might not be those very early adopters. They might be they want to see that evidence that, okay, this really does what it's supposed to do. Okay, this really is going to improve my ability to work with my patients and improve my efficiencies. And, and ultimately a couple of other quick points would, be willing to pivot along the way. So the solution you come up with initially may not be the final solution that you go to market with. So you got to be willing to pivot. And once you do get to that market, the other thing is, pricing, reimbursement, thinking about that. And that's another, going back to our earlier discussion about barriers, reimbursement is a barrier. And of course, that's coming along with remote patient monitoring and remote therapeutic monitoring. Those codes are in place, but it's, there's still a lot of uncertainty there. It's not 100% clear to physicians how they go about getting reimbursed, even though those codes are in place. But having a clear pricing strategy that's easy for people to understand and easy for them, to get into their regular flow and into their expenses that they can understand. And if they want to move away from it, they can move away from it as well.
Ward, I want to build on something you mentioned. You mentioned that sort of digital shouldn't only provide a solution for patients, but for our providers as well. And I think we have to be quite thoughtful as we're introducing new solutions that we're lowering the burden of care delivery, especially in the environment that we're in today. And Sandy, I'm curious, sort of given your orientation to physicians, sort of the work that you're doing with providers, how have you thought about making sure that the technology that you're introducing is not just sort of solving their problem, but also making it easier? And how do you think about sort of incorporating their voice into the design of what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Two parts there, and I'll enter into the democratization component first. So the way that we work, Caitlin, is that we have physicians that sign up for our network. And once they're in, we ask them every quarter, what are their challenges and their solutions? And then basically we build tools for them. So we actually include the physicians in various ways. Number one is that we ask them what are their challenges. And then we have a physician council that will then, represent the voice of the physicians and then selecting the tools that we then go on and build. So I think it's key to involve your users, and for our case, it's the providers, directly into every aspect of it in terms of even telling us what we should build, as well as testing it and then rolling it out. So that's absolutely critical in all of this. And then for the actual physicians themselves, we've actually gone back in technology. So many companies today are focused on building apps and trying to get emails and trying to optimize email opens and things like this. We've actually gone back to one of the most simplistic technology forms, which is SMS. And physicians and everybody loves SMS. Now, apart from when we were under the general election and everybody was getting spammed by SMS, everybody generally does love SMS. So we've actually embraced that technology, Caitlin, because it's just very, very simple to use. And this isn't because our particular physicians are incapable of using anything else. We just are embracing SMS just because it's so simplistic. So again, I would encourage the audience here when thinking about technology solutions is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just got to focus on what is the most simplistic and elegant solution.
I love the idea of aiming for simplicity. So how can we make the innovation integrate seamlessly into workflows or sort of the way that they do business that's sort of at their fingertips without adding to the burden of the care that they're delivering? I'm curious, Seth raises an interesting question. We've mentioned sort of the role of government obliquely throughout the panel, but he's sort of asking the question more directly, which is, what do the three of you think about the role of government? Could it be doing more or less to empower innovation? I'm actually not going to direct it. I'm going to open it up. Matt, I see you came off mute, and so perhaps you'd like to pile on first.
Sure. I'm very much an optimist. You have to be as an entrepreneur and look at the glass half full. So, the Biden administration has really been quite vocal about supporting caregivers. A lot of them are unpaid. They very often have to leave, important jobs, both for themselves financially, but also for the GDP of our country. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to have more and more programs to help the 53 million family caregivers that are really struggling. And some of them are not only caring for younger children, but also older adults. They're called sandwich caregivers. So I'm cautiously optimistic that some of these initiatives will offer relief to them, specifically in the older adult space and in the special needs space that we serve. We really believe that there's going to be more and more opportunities available, and not only for core digital health specifically, but some of the coaching, like was mentioned before. It really does require a hybrid model where you use technology as enabler, but still support with real human services. So I think I really think that the government's going to start waking up to that and increase Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement in that space.
Ward and Sandy, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I'll kind of go back to the regulatory theme, and under Scott Gottlieb, I felt like the FDA made a lot of progress in kind of turning the FDA around and making it more of a tool that innovators were willing to use versus shying away from, running from and trying to avoid. I think overall the FDA is doing the right thing, and we need that type of an organization in place to make sure that all these devices, whether software or hardware, are safe for patients to use. At the same time, with technology evolving so quickly, and I don't have all the answers for this, but it's super important that they accelerate their processes for how they're going to evaluate and approve these various technologies. I just think that's super important. And also, as Matt mentioned, being able to approve reimbursement for these different devices, because otherwise you'll have all this innovation, people trying to move forward, but it'll go nowhere ultimately.
The only thing I'd add to that, Caitlin, and great points from Ward and Matt, is the balance in regulation between now and the future. So in the future, what we just need to ensure is that innovation is not hampered. But in the coming years, I think there's a challenge coming, which is the tech giants pose a potential threat to innovation, which is, we already have seen, obviously, the acquisition of PillPack by Amazon, and all of the big tech giants have healthcare in their sights, which is good and bad. From a point of view, there is an opportunity to say, well, this is great, I might be able to sell my startup to Facebook, but they are notorious for hampering innovation and also squashing the small guy. So I hope that the government now can prevent hampering innovation, but I also hope that as the tech giants move into healthcare, that they also protect innovation by not allowing the tech giants to quash it.
It's a really interesting point. Sort of the ecosystem that the three of you are describing is one in which we hope sort of the regulatory environment keeps pace with our need for innovation, but also, Sandy, to your point, sort of the players have radically changed. And there's healthcare companies moving into digital, and there's digital companies moving into health. And eventually, I think the lines are going to continue to blur, and the question will become sort of who's driving healthcare, who's shaping healthcare, and what's the role that everyone's playing in our care journey.
Exactly. I mean, all of these big tech companies now, I mean, how easy would it be today to start a social media company? You can't. So let's just be careful in 5 years' time when they all have a stranglehold on healthcare that we're like, oh, it would be very hard to start a healthcare company now. Barriers to entry may be too high.
Yeah. And so in addition to the patients we've discussed, the providers, the innovators, Seth raised the role of government. I think there's also the question of sort of big tech and non-traditional healthcare companies sort of shaping the ecosystem as well. Well, I'd ask to open it up for questions at this point. I'd say you're welcome to keep chatting your questions. I think it's worked quite well. We're also a small group. If you want to come off mute, I'll leave the video optional and sort of ask a question. We'd love it. We've got a great array of panelists with diverse perspectives, and so eager and curious to hear what's on your minds. And I have more questions if no one asks one.
Well, this is Seth here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Seth, we'd love to hear.
I'm really intrigued by the answers Matt and Ward and Sandy gave about government, and also the big tech. So as you all know, Amazon, I don't remember who else were involved in some kind of a health, I think Wells Fargo, they all got together on kind of a health company, but then they kind of fell apart. So do you think they would be, at the end of the day, do you think these big tech companies are gonna take over healthcare, or are you worried about them? I mean, can you expand on that a little bit more? I mean, I'm very curious about all that.
I can maybe tee it up, Seth, because I flagged the big tech giants. So it's a mixed bag, right? In some ways, I think they're needed. The US healthcare system is broken. And I don't think that the current players will be the ones to fix it. It may well be an Elon Musk, it may well be a Jeff Bezos that comes in. So I think that it almost takes that type of radical thinking, radical re-engineering, and potentially a large capital injection to actually do some sort of seismic value benefit. But I am concerned that, for the smaller companies, if you do start to create an oligopoly within healthcare, it will potentially stifle innovation, or at least change it. It might not be the case that you'll have such a diverse marketplace if everybody is going to Amazon Prime for their healthcare.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think what Sandy said it very well. I mean, I think these big players, and you think about even the Walmarts of the world that are setting up these clinics and all their ultimately, it takes big players like that to drive innovation. And it's again, as Sandy said, our healthcare system is broken, and our legislators are not going to solve the problem. It's going to be up, I think, to private industry to come in to move the needle, and out of that ultimately will come more innovation, more opportunities for innovation. But it's going to take some of those big players, and again, like Sandy said, we just have to hope they don't squash the smaller innovators. But I don't think that will ever happen. I don't think you can ever put down the innovation or the entrepreneurs in the States, and the people that are coming up that want to have their own business and want to contribute and make a name for themselves.
The one thing that I'm thinking is you all are talking is sort of the corollary that often jumps to mind for me in this scenario is retail. And there's many examples, and none of them are perfect. But if we think about sort of the way that retail was disruptive with the leap to direct to consumer digital first, where companies didn't even have a brick and mortar presence. And there was a real bifurcation in the road as to those in the ecosystem who chose to sort of fast follow, leap to digital, sort of create an online presence, and those who didn't. And retail looks dramatically different today. And I feel quite similarly about healthcare. I think, Sandy, to your point about sort of radical ideas, 10 years from now, we won't be talking about digital health. It'll just be health. And the expectation will be digital. And I very much think we're moving in that direction. So appreciate your insights as to sort of how we get there. Welcome other questions from the group. Thank you, Seth, for kicking us off.
This is Mary Beth. There's a lot of trends out there. Are there any that you guys are seeing that you think are maybe a flop or are maybe just a fad, anything like that you're seeing? I know telehealth obviously is, I think, here to stay, but anything else like that you're seeing and have any thoughts on?
So Mary Beth, I can take a stab at that, which is an answer, but not maybe the direct one you're looking for. What I think is happening as we evolve in the future is that people which are creating very siloed, independent solutions, they're going to be flash in the pan. I think it's very important that as people start to design apps and any type of solution, that they start to think about the ecosystem that it'll get pulled into. So I think maybe not flash in the pan, but on the long term, the solutions and the companies that will survive are the ones which are already thinking about what is the patient and societal benefit that I bring, and then reverse engineering back from that.
Thank you.
I'll just chime in. I can't think of specific ones that are going to flops, but for ones that I think will flourish, I think digital measurement, digital phenotyping is going to really take a lot of people by surprise in a good way. For example, we're building a way of basically using eye tracking or how accurate you are in touching on the screen, or is your typing cadence or voice changing over time. There's just so much potential with AI and basically having some of these nonverbal cues that I think can really help with informed cognition and just overall abilities and where people are trending. So I'm really excited about AI specifically and using digital measurement tools as a way to really get ahead of some hurdles that might come up.
The other one I might throw out there for consideration, and Matt, you touched on this with the concept of AI, is I feel like right now we still sort of go to healthcare. It's become much easier. It's in my phone, it's on my computer, but I still go to healthcare, and I'm sort of waiting for the moment where the script is flipped and healthcare comes to me. And I'm getting push notifications about my wellness, sort of they're tracking, to your point, Matt, sort of the way that I've spent my day, my time, but it's sort of wellness partnership instead of sort of acute or episodic healthcare interchange. And we may be 5 or 10 years away from that, but that's sort of a bubbling trend, and I'm excited to see how that unfolds.
You know, one thing that comes to mind is when you think about something that maybe has not taken hold or is not very well accepted by physicians, so it will be interesting to see how this evolves, is electronic data records. I think the right intent, the intent is there, and there's a need for electronic data records. But the problem I think that physicians are challenged with is when you're sitting in the office and all they're doing is entering in data, and when the nurses are on the floor of acute care hospitals, all they're doing is sitting there entering in data. I think there's a lot of, that kind of side of digital health, if you will, needs a lot of improvement. So, the need is there for the records, but what will we see innovation-wise that can help reduce that workload?
Mm-hmm. Back to the earlier point about technology to reduce burden. I'm curious to sort of pivot for a moment. Paula just chatted a really interesting question that I'd love your thoughts on, which is universal healthcare. Sort of were that to come to pass, sort of what would the impact be on digital innovation? And we don't have a crystal ball, but I'd love your thoughts, sort of, you can look forward to that future. What do you think the impacts might be of universal healthcare on digital health?
I think that's a touchy topic. Nobody wants to go there. Maybe
I was going to say, we won't pull out.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Maybe Sandy, as you are from the UK originally.
I am a fan of universal healthcare to a degree, and I think that there needs to be obviously basic elements in place of it. And just from my opinion, I'm not sure that everybody needs to. We had our daughter last year, and literally they came around and said, "How would you like your steak cooked?" When we were there. I don't think that's needed, but I think I am a big believer in having some elements of universal healthcare pulled through. We just need to ensure that there is still a decent platform where innovation can happen, with people seeing that there's transparency in the returns from us being able to now create something from an innovation point of view. So as long as the transparency is there, and actually universal healthcare might make it easier. I have a lot of experience working with universal healthcare in Europe, and it's actually a much more transparent process in being able to understand what the value of your product is going to do, because you ultimately just have one customer. So actually, I do think that there is benefits to it, but as we do see that it's a little bit less of the Wild West, because we basically now today in the US are making digital health products because we can charge high premiums. Universal healthcare would reduce those premiums, but I think that actually would have a benefit for everybody, and it would drive transparency and understanding what we were trying to actually create from a value point of view.
The one thing I get worried about, of course, with universal healthcare is stifling innovation. But at the same time, it could provide benefits in standardization in healthcare and standardization in electronic health records. Right now, one of the biggest problems with digital health and health records is there's all these different EHRs out there that you have to integrate with, and that creates a huge burden for innovation. So, potentially there might be some standardization on a number of fronts.
I think it's important to note as well that with the US system, you have massive bureaucracy, and it's only increasing. And I'm going to paraphrase a report that came out just a couple of weeks ago, but the number of physicians versus bureaucrats within the US health system from the 1990 up until now, it's gone up to, for every one physician, you almost have 90 bureaucrats. And that went up from something like from 7 to 90. So if you could take that out by having universal healthcare, that gives you massive efficiency gains that you can put back into innovation.
Matt, did you have a comment as well?
Well, I'll kind of agree with Ward on the interoperability and getting standardization there. I think it's going to really help kind of put all of the different disparate systems and records together and be able to, I'm a data warehousing guy. So if you can basically merge that information, you can have, better AI and learning and basically better outcomes. I am, also, slightly concerned about kind of favoritism. Whoever has the most money to lobby and have the most resources, they're going to get the preference in terms of bids and contracts, which obviously, small bootstrap companies like, Sandy and myself, we would not be at the table. So there has to be some fair equity for both sides and, minority owned businesses and, having, diverse representation. But, if done right, I think it could be very helpful in giving more access to people who need it, who can't get it today.
I want to pick up on a thread that was mentioned, which was sort of data warehousing and data sharing. And we've talked quite a bit about sort of enabling interoperability. And I talked about wanting healthcare to come to me. I think the flip side of that is this concern around privacy, around cybersecurity, around how do I control how my data is shared in a digital environment. And so I'd welcome your thoughts, sort of how do we innovate and create this interconnected world, but also be thoughtful and sensitive to the real cybersecurity concerns that we're creating by building this ecosystem. I'll let anyone jump on that who wants to.
The only thing I will say is when you think about barriers, and going back to the barrier question we had earlier, security, privacy, that's a huge barrier for innovation, in my opinion. I get it and we need it, but it's a huge barrier as well.
Mm-hmm. And at the risk, we have 2 minutes left, and I want to hit a couple sort of last questions, rapid fire, if I can. Dr. Sneha's asking sort of what's your take on blockchain in the context of interoperability? And so if any of the three of you have thoughts on that, would welcome your take on her question.
I'm a big fan of it. I think, decentralized ledgers and basically having a more transparent, free, operating system is going to be, super helpful as long as it can be controls are put in place. But I think the speed to make decisions, less human error helps healthcare, it helps finance, it helps, so many different types of industries. So I'm a fan of it.
Mm-hmm. And the last question, maybe to close us out, Paul is asking about the 21st Century Cures Act. And what do you see coming soon? If you think about sort of the patient access provisions that are included and the implications for interoperability, sort of any final closing thoughts in our last minute on what that might mean for patient access? I'll open it up to anyone to jump on it, or we can take it as something to reflect on. Okay. Well, I want to be conscious of time. I know that it's a Thursday, we're nearing the weekend, and it's 7:15, and sort of my dog is telling me that it's time for dinner, but thank you for the thoughtful panel. I really appreciated the conversation. I learned quite a bit. I think you've opened a number of questions for me that I'm going to continue to reflect on. So I just want to say thank you for the time and thank you everyone for the thoughtful questions. We're sharing here on the screen a few resources that were sent out. We've done some thinking at McKinsey on sort of the way that COVID has shaped consumers, our expectations for healthcare, the leap that we see to telehealth, and also sort of business building and our thoughts sort of across industry about how you build a successful and resilient digital business. And so to the extent that it's helpful, I wanted to make those resources available to this broader group. And obviously it reflects a number of the themes that the panel touched on. So thank you. Chris and Mary Beth, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. And there is a link sent out in the chat so you guys can access these resources through the website. And we can go ahead and introduce Jessica from Azalea. If Jessica pops on, let me know. Deloitte was not able to join us, but we do want to say thank you for being a society sponsor. So appreciate that. And then we do have a couple events. Brian, if you're still on, would you like to talk us through those?
Sure, I sure am. We have one more event this year coming up in November. This is going to be a joint event with one of our sister societies in TAG, the TAG FinTech Society, and we're going to be talking about emerging financial technology trends in healthcare. We are looking to do this as a hybrid event, in person, and probably at least in person, and maybe also video. So TBD on format right now, but we're certainly looking to get together again. So looking forward to that. That's going to be down at the ATV. And then, can't believe it, but we're already starting to talk about 2022 calendar and programming for 2022. And we certainly have Digital Health Day at the Capitol. That is one of our marquee events that we have every single year. Really large gathering of folks for that one that we do down at the Capitol. We partner with Georgia Hymns every single year and get a lot of really good conversation drummed up in those beginning of the year type of events that we have then. So, and then stay tuned for a little bit more information on our summit, which should be coming sometime in early 2022, exact dates to be determined. Just a couple of additional notes on some upcoming healthcare technology events, non-TAG events. We have, there is the Atlanta Healthcare Entrepreneur Meetup hosted by ATV. There's the Georgia Hymns Annual Conference in about a month, and the Georgia Bio Innovation Summit. Again, 2 and 3 day. The Georgia Hymns event is an all-day event. The Georgia Bio is a two-day event. So, looking forward to those as well. And please follow us on social media. We have a very large following at this point of LinkedIn and on Twitter. And as always, you can go online to our website on tagonline.org, and you can look at all the events coming up. So please follow, like, share, all the other stuff. And again, I want to say a huge thank you to Caitlin. Thank you very much for moderating. Excellent job of keeping us honest in this program. Ward, Sandy, Matt, thank you so much for your insight and your for helping us through this whole entire emerging technologies in the post-COVID era. So thank you so much, guys. And that's my applause.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was an amazing panel, and Caitlin, you did an awesome job moderating. So just can't thank you guys enough.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciated the discussion.